Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. If you've been watching, thank you, because this is part of the 24-hour subathon on the channel. How exciting, Kelsey. Kelsey just popped on. We had some great chats with some of the hosts earlier, but this is our segment devoted strictly and solely to our show, Marvel-ous Movie Mondays, which you can catch every single Monday. Today, you're seeing it on Saturday, because that's when we normally record it, right, Kelsey?
Yeah.
And we are going to be giving you our review for a brand new film that just hit theaters Thursday night, and that is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, I know because this is live streamed, we don't want to just bombard you with spoilers right away, so we will put up a banner that says spoilers later on, in which you guys can tune out if you haven't seen the movie. But by now, if you're really a Marvel diehard, you've probably seen the movie, or at least kind of know what to expect. So we're going to kind of talk about it. Yes, Josh or JD, Quantumania. Yes, we're here. We're going to talk about it as openly as we can without spoilers. And then later on, if we need to dive into specific spoilers, we will. What's up, Kelsey? You look distressed.
JD's name is Joshua?
Yes, it is.
I didn't know that.
I mean, all initials stand for something, don't they?
What a fun fact to learn.
That's the fun fact about the subathon. You learn so much. We were learning so much. Kelsey, you want to just get into this review?
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's do it, Dill.
Yeah, Jake says this was a movie. It was.
Jake wasn't impressed. I'll go on record right now and say, Dill, I enjoyed my time watching Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I had a good time.
I think the first thing you have to acknowledge is like the fact that it hasn't been getting great reviews and like what that means. And it's really interesting reading some of those reviews because a lot of them are pointed at the filmmaking, the visuals, because there's been a lot of slack or that the visual effects department has been getting at Marvel. So like people haven't been biggest fans of how they're treated and all that. And
Sure.
and a lot of it has shown in some of their quality. Things seem rushed. Things seem thrown together. People don't love the idea that everything kind of looks fake nowadays. It doesn't really look realistic like the old days of Iron Man or Captain America, where everything looked tangible and like it lived in our universe. But this isn't that type of movie either. This is Quantum Realm. I mean, it's going to feel a little bit different, but then you have the other side, which doesn't like it for like the story elements and the fact that it is merely setting up things to come and not really existing as its own movie. And I do hear some of those criticisms. I am in the camp of I'm mixed on it, but the things I expected to dislike aren't the things I disliked about it. The things I expected to dislike, I actually was a little bit more pleasantly surprised by, which I think is nice. I think when you go into a film, as soon as it gets that Rotten Tomatoes rotten rating, you're like, all right, so I know I'm going into something that's not great. But I think that honestly helped because it kind of like lowered my expectations to where I was a little bit more pleasantly surprised. Kind of like Eternals. Like I went into that being like, this is the first rotten movie. Like, damn. And I watched it. I was like, I love this. So I think there's a lot to say about expectations and fan expectations. Also because it is if you want to call it an episodic thing, the season premiere of phase 5, this is kind of like introducing us to the main villain for the rest of the next 2 phases and kind of just saying like, this is where we're going. And it feels like we at least have now an idea of where it's going. And yeah, JD brings up a good point. I mean, it does have an 84 audience score, which means people in the audience are liking it a lot more than the critics are. But again, the critics are looking at it from a deeper lens than purely enjoyability and looking at it in the grand scheme of a franchise. They're looking at it as its own movie and looking at a lot of the technicals, a lot of the actual structural makeup of the film. But Kels, let's talk about some of the things you did like, first of all, before we get into maybe some of our negatives. What was like the main thing that you enjoyed the most? Because I have a very clear like favorite part about this movie. And I think I have not made it a secret, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, Dill, I was interested to hear you say like the things that you expected not to like you were pleasantly surprised, and the things that you didn't like were things that you didn't expect to not like, because I feel exactly the same way. Like, I guess we'll get into our dislikes later, but the things that I did like were definitely like the whole world building of the quantum realm. I thought that was super cool, like this introduction to all these different characters and creatures, and like I just thought that was like, it was just like so immersive. Like you were just like we were in it, and there was like no question that like any part of this wasn't like fully developed. Like it definitely didn't feel like a half-baked, like half-developed world. You know what I mean?
They really tried to
are like felt like overwhelmed by that and thought that they were trying to do too much. But I thought that it was like, I was like, well, if we're gonna do it, if we're gonna be in the
Right.
quantum realm, like let's do it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I definitely think it has like a very distinct look, and I like all the little creatures and all that stuff. It reminded me of the Disney movie that came out recently, Strange World, where it's like trying
Mm,
really hard to just make something unique and distinct. Because at the end of the day, these are comic book movies, and I feel like the MCU goes in one of two directions. It goes full fledged realism, kind of like the Captain America and Iron Man movies, where it like feels like something that would happen in your universe. Everything's very like technology based, but to the point where it's not really going into that fantasy realm. And then you have stuff like this, stuff like Ant-Man, stuff like Shang-Chi, or this is Ant-Man, stuff like Doctor Strange, where it like really goes into like the whole, like, this is a comic book, this is not real life. And this felt very much like that.
yeah.
Because the quantum realm itself, and that was one of the things I was pleasantly surprised by, was how inventive the world seemed. I do
Mm,
think the visuals are hit or miss in this fact that I always thought it was fake. Like, it never really convinced me that this was a real place. Like, it looked a
okay.
little cartoonish at times, but I still don't love like the flat kind of like brown aesthetic, muddy aesthetic. Like, I think they could have brightened it up a bit, but I do think a lot of the concepts of the creatures and just the different worlds and the size and scope was really cool. One of my main worries going into this film was that the beauty of the Ant-Man films, and I'm not a huge fan of the first Ant-Man, I like the second Ant-Man a lot, but
Hmm.
the beauty of it, I think, is the idea that you're seeing him big and small within a familiar landscape. Like, you are used to seeing your world the way it is, and you're seeing him with these Thomas the Tank Engine trains. Like, I love how they play with scope. Here, I was
Sure.
worried. I was like, if they're all going to the quantum realm, they're all going to be the same size. Like,
Yeah.
that's going to lose the whole point of what Ant-Man has been, which is the fact that he's this small guy in this big world, or this big guy in the small world. That being said, I think they do a good job in still giving us great shrinking and growing effects in the quantum realm, which I was surprised
Yeah.
by. I really did like how they still played around with that. Like, they did decide to like play with the scope and size and scale of him as a person, which is something I didn't think they would do. I thought everything was just going to be the same size, because in the trailer you see the main marquee fight is him versus Kang, kind of boxing it out, basically like fist fight. And I'm like, the whole charm is that he gets bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. Like, it's just going to be a
Right.
fist fight because they're both the same size now. But I did like how a lot of action was him growing, him shrinking, all that. So like, I was
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised by that. Like, I do like how Ant-Man uses the idea of him being small and big to their advantage.
Yeah. And another thing that I liked that carried over through this film that like is prevalent in the first two Ant-Man films is that there's so much heart in these movies.
Mm,
Like all Scott Lang wants to do is protect his daughter and like be a family man. Like that has been his goal since we saw him get out of prison in Ant-Man 1. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like he's just always wanted to be there for his daughter and like just family and like his father-daughter relationship that he has like is always at the core of these movies. And that was another thing that I really, really, really liked about this film is that it's still a very prevalent theme. Even we're in this fantastical, whimsical, crazy world, like still at the core of this movie, like it's still about like him protecting his daughter and being there for Cassie,
mhm.
which
Yeah.
was sweet.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to kind of get into just like some of our favorite set pieces while we're still on the visuals. I think one of the most astounding visual effects parts was I call it the Ralph breaks the internet moment, where there's just a million Ant-Mans, and he's like, it was in the trailer, so I'm
Oh,
able to talk about it, but like, it's like a million
really, Dill?
Ant-Mans
You
climbing on
liked
top of
this
one another.
part where he was like multiplying?
In terms of visuals, yeah, I thought it was so cool. Like, it looked
Yeah.
really interesting. The sea of people, like, I like that effect where it's like people on top of people. I like that. And I thought this was really well done, where he gets like big and then he kind of like spirals out of control. It's like almost like your mind is twisting, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I really like that sequence. It added probably my favorite comedic bit, which I won't spoil here. That was
Okay.
my favorite comedic bit in the movie, because it was like that was fun. That felt like Ant-Man to me.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
like that set piece, and I do like all the big like slugs and big monsters and all that stuff. Landon turned to me. Landon, my one of our best friends, was at the movie with us and kind of leaned to me during some of the moments and said, "That looks like Star Wars." And at first, I heard people comparing this to Star Wars, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Star Wars and MCU? What?" And then I watch it, and it makes a lot of sense. It feels kind of like you're kind of outskirts, wasteland, different planets with all these different creatures. It felt very Star Wars-esque in that sense, like kind of like the old desert of like all these misfit alien things. Like it felt very similar. I think it's a different tone than Star Wars still, and I think some of the fights themselves are a little more overblown than Star Wars. But I think in terms of the world building and creatures, there were some similarities, which I liked. Um, Kelsey, did you have any like standout action moments or like visual moments while we're still on the visuals and aesthetic of it all?
Hmm. You just reminded me of that, and I the bit where he's like multiplying, I felt like went on a little bit too long. I
Okay.
was
Yeah.
like, I definitely, I thought that it was funny and cool, and like, there's a bunch of Paul Rudds that are all looking at each other like, what do we do? I
Mhm.
thought that it was a touch too long. Like, I wish
Yeah.
that he
That's
figured it
fair.
out a little bit better.
Yeah.
Um, I okay, so one of my favorite like visual moments I'd have to say was when Hope, Hank, and Janet are going to the bar and or like, and Hank tries to like order the drink. He's like, "Do you have anything that could get me drunk?" And then they're drinking those drinks and they have those cute little like squid guys in them. And
You
then
thought it was cute?
yeah, I thought
They're
it
like
was so
slurping them down.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
know. That was
I did share
tragic.
Kelsey before you got onto the subathon. I did share everyone my incident with rodents, and I shared your story about the olive oil.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did.
Oh, that was
And it kind of
traumatic.
reminded me of that, like, oh, this poor little thing, just like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then Bill Murray just ate it. It was
Yeah. Well,
tragic.
I think we can get now into kind of like the comedy and the performances in a way. Like, because I think the comedy, that is the one element where Ant-Man has always been like comedy films, but I think this film is trying so hard to set up a scary villain and really needs the villain to be scary. And when the film is trying to commit to that, I think it's really strong. But I do think the humor at times, and this has been a qualm I've had with some films, including Eternals, which I love, the humor sometimes got in the way. And I think that's just because Ant-Man is such a funny character, but
Mhm.
Kang is such a serious figure, and the universe needs to set him up as such a scary figure that that does not blend very well. And I think that was my biggest qualm with the film. And
Yeah,
that was, like I
yeah.
said, the things I expected to be great weren't. The humor I expected to be great because it was an Ant-Man film. But the more I thought about it, I was like, the film they're trying to set up, I think with any other hero, it would have been a lot more serious, and it would have kind of posed a bigger threat to the universe. But because you kind of have this Paul Rudd kind of nonchalantness, I mean, the opening of the film, it's the welcome back Cotter. It's like him kind of strolling down the street, and it kind of ends that way too. And it's like, I
Yeah.
just don't know if that tone is what it needed, is what the MCU needed to set up its big villain. And,
Yeah.
we'll talk about this as a purely set up movie in a bit, but I do feel like Kang, spoiler alert, was my favorite part of the movie, so that when the comedy kind of interjected at times, I was a little like, oh, just let it be. Like, let them talk. Let it be serious if you're gonna go
Yeah.
that route. Because we've
Yeah.
seen with like stuff like Thor, it's kind of done the opposite. It was so serious and they kind of lightened Thor up. Here, it feels disjointed from the first two Ant-Mans and how serious it's trying to be, but they
Right.
still try to keep, it's like they try to keep the best of both worlds. Keep it funny for Ant-Man, but also keep it serious for Kang. And sometimes that doesn't blend really well for me. And I think there are some examples that are more spoiler heavy, but again, like I don't know if that always worked for me.
Yeah. No, I agree, Dale. That was one of my complaints about this movie is that because I feel like with the first two Ant-Man movies, I feel like they're both comedies first and
Hmm.
then action movies and then a
Right.
superhero movie. And I think that's the great thing about the Ant-Man movies is that they tonally, like they are completely their own thing, separate from the rest of the MCU movies. And where this one, it kind of fell into a trap of like tonally matching the rest of the MCU movies, but I think that it worked as a as a disadvantage. It was kind of did a
Hmm.
disservice to the Ant-Man movies because it like the comedy really takes a backseat in this movie. And when
Yeah.
they try to include it, it you're right, it doesn't feel
Yeah.
natural. It doesn't feel like it works super well.
And the problem is I want to see Paul Rudd be funny. I
Yeah,
do. Like I don't want to
that's what
see
we
him
love
be
about
like,
it.
yeah, and I think that's the problem is that in this movie you needed your hero to be a little bit more serious. And in terms of like the father-daughter thing, like you were saying, I like it, but it's also like I've seen so many films now where it's about like the father-daughter, father-son, or mother-daughter, whatever relationship, where I felt like they needed something else.
Yeah.
It almost felt like kind of like a bit of the same of what we've seen in other movies, like kind of this, parent child thing, and that being like kind of the only story for them, really, because this is essentially, I think this is a lot of people's qualms and one of my qualms. This is essentially setting up the big bad in the MCU Phase 5. It's setting up Kang. And in order
Yeah.
to do that, I feel like a lot of other characters' storylines were kind of minimalized for that. I think Janet had a
Yeah.
lot to do in this movie because she's integral. But I think
Yeah.
Ant-Man was just there because they needed to put Kang somewhere to escape from or whatever. And Ant-Man, that made sense to go in the quantum realm. But I really feel like his actual arc with Cassie, it didn't really change for me. It was like he loved her and wanted to protect her at the beginning with the prison stuff. He was always, like, Dad, like, stop, I got it. And he's like, no, like, don't go to prison, don't get in trouble. And at the end, it's kind of a similar thing. It's like, Dad, you got to trust me. And he's like, all right, yeah, I trust you, I love you, I got to protect you. Like, it didn't really change for me. Maybe
Yeah.
he's a little bit more
Well,
trusting in Cassie's abilities at the end, but it still feels like it's the same story the whole way through. Whereas I feel like Janet got a lot of growth, and I feel like obviously
sure.
Kang had a lot of arc in his story, but and even Hank, I'll admit, not the biggest Michael Douglas fan. This was my favorite Hank Pym we've seen so far. I liked his
Really?
moments in this film a lot, but I do think Scott's story and Cassie's story, while prominent and nice, didn't feel like anything out of the ordinary, or didn't feel like anything, or what am I trying to say? Didn't feel like anything new. Felt kind of ordinary, kind of like
Mm.
where I expected the film to go, and it didn't go to like another degree. I feel like the relationship was kind of stagnant, and I
Well,
haven't even brought up the other titular character, which we will in a sec, because that's my biggest
right.
qualm of the movie.
Oh, she was in this movie?
No, and that's my biggest qualm of the movie is you're gonna call this movie Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then the Wasp, unless they're referring to the Wasp as Janet, then fine. But like, that's not what they're doing. It's
Yeah,
literally,
no.
oh, the last movie was Ant-Man and the Wasp, so we have to keep that title. They should have called this Ant-Man Quantumania or Quantumania. Like, don't even call it and the
Yeah.
Wasp, because that's a disservice to that character. And I know the actress problematic. We're not going to get into that, but it's still the titular character, and you're giving her
Right.
nothing to where
Well,
there's a moment where there's like this beautiful romantic moment, but it means nothing because we didn't even see them interact for the whole freaking film.
yeah. Yeah, we'll get there in a second, but what
Mhm.
I have to say about Scott and Cassie's relationship, Dill, is that I don't think that it was about their relationship changing necessarily. What I like gathered from like their time together in this film and the arc they were trying to, from get from point A to point B was that like Cassie the entire time is like, you're a superhero. You should be doing more. You should be helping people. Like all these people are displaced. She starts the movie at like a protest, and advocating for people who are displaced from the blip. Like, and she's just constantly trying to like, basically like shake her father, Scott, and be like, no, like you have this like incredible like these powers and this gift, like you should absolutely be doing more. And I felt like that was kind of like the message that was, it was more about Scott growing than
Mhm.
their relationship, if that makes
Right.
sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally see that. And Carly brought up a good suggestion. It would have been better if the first half was that kind of full fledged comedy, and then as soon as Kang shows up, boom, it's a tonal shift. I actually kind of
Right.
would have liked that. And they kind of
Right.
go for that, but then they still try to pepper in these jokes and stuff, especially with what we'll talk about soon, Modoc, which JD love. Yeah, we had thoughts of Modoc, and I didn't hide those feelings when we left the theater because Kelsey and I try not to talk about the movie right after
Yeah.
theater, but
We
I do have thoughts.
sit in the train in silence, like
Yeah.
nothing
Well,
gets
luckily we had Landon there
discussed.
to just tell us his thoughts because I think he really
Right.
liked it. But
Yeah.
another thing, while we're just on the topic of it, the Wasp useless in this movie, and I don't think that's necessarily her fault. I'm not going to defend Evangeline Lilly's personal beliefs, but I do think if I'm an actor and I see that movie has my name in the title and I see this movie, I'd be upset if I was her. Um,
Right.
it sucks because it really is not a boss movie, and there are moments where they try at the end to like really hammer home this romance, and it's like if you hadn't seen, I told Landon this too. I was like, if you hadn't seen a movie in the MCU and this was your first one, you would not even know they were together until the
Yeah.
end. You would have been like, oh,
Yeah.
they're together, and that shouldn't be a thing. I mean, this is your central titular romance. Like
Mhm.
this is the only romance that is, oh, well, next to WandaVision where they're both in the title together, you know?
Right. Well, I never thought that their romance was like really a like pivotal point of like any of
No,
the
but
Ant-Mans. Like I
at
feel like it's
least
always been about him and like his daughter and like his family,
well, that's
you
the
know?
thing, but at least the last one, they at least tried to make it about the partnership. Like, it was
Right.
called Ant-Man and the Wasp, and they
No,
really did
100%.
hammer home on that.
No, I'm
But
not trying to say
yeah,
that they like I'm not defending
yeah, yeah,
like the use of her in this movie at all because there
awful.
was none.
Yeah, no,
I'm just saying like
yeah.
but
Well, I was gonna say, do you want to talk about like some of the new characters?
yeah, sure. Well, I feel
Yeah.
like we talked about all the things that we liked and we barely talked about Kang.
Well, that's
And
what I'm
he
getting to.
was
The new characters. Yeah,
obviously like one of the
yeah.
better
Yeah,
moments,
so there's
if not the best
two characters we've
part of
seen
this
before,
movie.
but in other instances. We have Darren Cross, who we saw as a Yellow Jacket, but now he's MODOK, which we knew from the trailers. We saw his face. It looked weird in the trailers. It still looks weird here. We'll talk about it in a sec. Kang, though, we saw an iteration of him in Loki season 1. Now we're seeing him again here. That was what I was building this review up to, because I wanted to kind of get the negative out of the way first, because the positive is Kang. Kang is awesome. Kang is my favorite villain in the MCU, bar none. Nah, not I would take that back. One of my favorites. Like, he's has a potential to be the best. I really do love
Yeah.
him as a
Yeah.
villain, as a character. They find a way to still give him humanity, which is weird because he has none really, but they still give something. And that's where I think Janet's storyline is the best in the film, next to Kang's, because I really like how they kind of showed their relationship. The only thing is that this movie is so Kang forward that the others kind of pale in comparison, and it almost feels like other people said, it almost feels like an advertisement for future stuff rather than its own film. Like, it almost feels like this is a sneak peek on how dangerous Kang's going to be for when it actually matters later on. Because in this film, we'll talk about spoilers, but like, it doesn't really go much. It doesn't really go there. It's hard to talk about without spoilers. But what were your thoughts on Kang? What were your thoughts on?
Well, I think that Jonathan Majors is like I feel like he's gotten such a gift. Just like
Mm,
solely as like an actor's point of view right now, like he is such like a gift right now with this role as Kang because he just gets to play so many different versions of the same dude. And I find that so cool and I'm so jealous. And honestly, like he's already killing it. We've only seen him in two projects so far as this character, Loki and this movie. And like he's just like so captivating on screen like and he's just so powerful like it's so I'm just so excited for this like this is one of the projects Dill where it feels like yes it's setting up future things but at least the future things that it's setting up like you're excited for like all of phase 4 seemed to be setting up something future question mark
mhm.
but we never really even truly knew what it was setting up like the
Right.
multiverse question mark like we didn't know ever at a certain point like what exactly it was setting up or at least this one like yes it's a setup movie but at least it's for something so good and so rewarding that like fine yeah give me the setup movie I'm good if this is what I'm gonna get later on so be it you know what I mean
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. But yeah, Kang, I love him as a character in terms of villain. I think he does pose an actual threatening presence.
yeah
And I have something along that note in spoilers, which we'll talk about soon, in like 5-10 minutes. Just
and
because
we
I
were
think there's
all
a specific what they do with Kang in terms of the resolution. I'm a little mixed on, because I think we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
like
But
the
Jonathan
ending
Majors is excellent. Yeah, kind of the
yeah
ending, not the post credits, but like the ending.
well
But then going
I
into the post
mean
credits.
I don't want to talk on behalf of the whole fandom, but I just felt personally like we were all, or like I at least was a little nervous, like coming off of Thanos and like Endgame. I was like, who's gonna be worse than this? Like, who is gonna be
Mhm.
able to match like this unbeatable, unstoppable force that's like literally a threat to like the entire universe? And
Yeah,
I feel like they fucking did it.
yeah, they did.
They found him.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
this is
he's great.
worse than Thanos. Like, Kang versus Thanos? Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So and Carly brings up a good point too. Like, he's having a year. I mean, he's going to be in this movie Magazine Dreams that was at Sundance that did really well, and he's going to be the villain in Creed 3. So we're going to get to see him and Michael B. Jordan literally punching the shit out of each other, and that's going to be
Mm.
amazing. And I like and this is in the trailer, so I'll talk about it. I like how they didn't just show him with lasers and with the force, like beating people up. They showed him
Right.
actually just punching Scott,
Right.
and that alone too shows the power. It's like when Thanos just like starts punching people. It's like, no, he can also just fight hand to hand. It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to have all the stones. He's just as
Right.
strong as it. Last thing we'll talk about really quick before we get into spoilers. Bill Murray, thoughts?
Who?
Kelsey doesn't like Bill Murray.
Not only that, it's just like
Yeah,
I just thought he was completely unnecessary, completely useless.
I do too. I think you get
Like,
rid of
what?
that scene. Strictly seemed to be there for exposition, solely for Janet to tell the rest of the people what was going on. But I feel like that they could have done that either way. Janet could have just said, "Hey guys, here's what's going on." Not had Bill Murray sipping his tea or his squid drink and being like, "You guys don't know what Janet did." Oh, well, I gotta tell you before we slept together. And I'm like, oh,
And he doesn't even like say much. He's just like, "Oh, and
Yeah.
now I'm gonna have to take you to him." And then it's like,
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
weird. Oh, yeah, and then we have to talk about MODOK because I I think for people who really, really, really couldn't wait to see MODOK because they were comic book fans, they were probably really upset. Or most of them that I've talked to have been upset because it's like they make him into a joke in this thing. And I think another problem is also, like we said, the second half, in order to get what they want accomplished, they need to make it serious. And I think MODOK undercuts a lot of the seriousness with humor that
Mm-hmm.
it seemed a little childish. But then you have someone like JD here talking about how much he loved MODOK and he wanted more of MODOK. And I think I agree in the sense that I want more of MODOK as the villain. And I think we got too much of MODOK as the cheap kind of punching bag joke device
Yeah.
to undercut the serious moments. And I don't think we needed to undercut the serious moments. I think they could have kept him more serious, make him as evil as he is,
Right.
or as he could be. And then, like, if you want to get into humor stuff, do a Ragnarok or a Love and Thunder later, and then make him a joke in the next one or something. You know, like I
Yeah.
feel like it was just too little time, and they tried to give him this full arc. And also Darren Cross, a character no one really cared to see again, and they just kind of felt like they forced that into like, oh, here's how we're gonna get Darren Cross back in. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Mm. So, Dill, as you know, when we walked out of the theater, because this was something I did reveal to you, was that this was a surprise for me because when, you know, we don't watch the trailers too many times. Like I watch them maybe max twice just so I can like, you know, write down some talking points so we can talk about them on the pod. But I really when trailers come out like so far in advance and then we talk about them and then we move on, I forget a lot of what like was shown to me, especially when it comes to like, you know, like the third Ant-Man movie. Like I'm not over analyzing that trailer because like that's not the project that I'm most excited for. You know what I mean? So when this happened, I was like, oh my God, Darren Cross is in this film. What bothered me about the MODOK reveal is that they literally set him up because that was Bill Murray's job in this film was to set up MODOK, right? He was like, oh, he sent the most dangerous thing in the quantum realm for you. It's a mechanism only designed for killing. Like, it's going to be so bad. And he's like, literally, like, not scary or like threatening at all.
Well, I think that's one of the examples of in a comic book that looks a lot scarier, but live action, it's always going to look stupid. It reminded me of JJ the Jet Plane. Do you remember that when we were a kid? With like the little airplanes, and it would just be these like big baby faces with the airplanes.
Yeah.
That's what
I
that
know
reminded
exactly
me of.
what
It
you're
looks
talking about.
so goofy and so dumb that I'm like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, the
And for
design
an
could have
Ant-Man
been
movie,
executed a little bit better
for
for
a
that.
movie where you're not introducing the big bad that is going to destroy every universe ever, it works. It's an Ant-Man movie. It can be silly, but when you're trying, like I said, to make it so serious and make this terrifying presence, I just don't think it works. So we will see. Yes,
JD
JD
said
knows
JJ.
JJ. Yep. So now let's just get into spoilers because I feel like this is kind of where we need to like talk a little bit more in depth into like
I feel
Kang's
like this
overall.
is where we're gonna lose Chris if we haven't lost him already.
Yeah. So Chris,
and I just feel bad because he was like, "Should I still even go see it tomorrow?" And yes, you should.
Yes, you should, because I think
you
everyone
should.
should still get their own opinion on it. Chris, I personally
I think you'll
liked.
have a better time than you think you're
Yes,
gonna have.
I think it's still enjoyable from an entertainment standpoint. It's just I don't know if it's the best movie. And we'll talk about it now because we're gonna get into spoilers. So if you have not seen Quantumania or you don't want to know what happens or if you forget it, because a lot of people have been saying that too. It's like, I forgot I even watched it because it's like such a nothing movie. I disagree with that. I still
That's
think it
crazy.
leaves
I
an
feel like.
impact.
Did you
Well,
guys watch Thor: Love and Thunder? This was exponentially better than that
and
film.
I agree with that. But here's the thing, and I'll get into the spoilers right now. Kang as a presence is so scary and stuff,
Yeah.
but they made it out to be that this is the one, like they said, that they exiled.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be the most dangerous of all the Kangs, yet Ant-Man beat him. And that's kind of where I'm like, if they really want to set him up as the most terrifying presence, and
Mm.
JD says right here, I'm not sure Kang had the ending you think, Dill. And maybe he is still out there, that version of Kang. But and Carly, yes, Kang
Yeah,
is
Kang
sexy.
is sexy. That's
Um,
true. That's accurate.
but I don't know if killing him, even if he's not dead, it could have been a Wanda Maximoff thing where is he dead? Is he not? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Doing that though makes it seem like he's beatable. And if your whole goal in the movie is to
Hmm.
show that this is an unstoppable presence, you don't kill him off. If anything, maybe you push him into another, open up another portal and shove him in there and close it really fast. And then it's like, where did he go? Oh no.
Yeah.
And then it's like the audience like, oh no, Kang's out there. He's scared. He's scared. He's scared. But then to see the heroes just beat him and him blow up, it's like, great, that's awesome for Ant-Man, but it's like you had literally the tiny guy, the ant guy, and I guess that's the point. Like the little guy, don't count out the little
Look
guy.
out for the little guy.
But when you have him beat what is supposedly going to be the most threatening villain of the MCU ever, and I get the whole point with the post credits, there's going to be variants of him that are going to come to play.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is the scariest version of Kang that they needed to exile because he's the most dangerous, this should be the one that we follow through the MCU. And I feel like to kill him, or at least give the audience impression that he's gone, I understand the thought of like Scott goes home and he's still thinking about it. It's leaving him traumatized. And then in the post-credit scene, we see Loki also have this traumatized look on his face. But it's
Yeah.
like, I wish they had kept that version alive to give the audience that sense of fear of, oh shit, we're in for something. Because now it's like all these other variants. We've seen a nicer variant of Kang. Like, are they all? They could be all as destructive as him, but are they all going to be as like out of control, scary as him? You know, like this should have been,
Right.
like Carly said, I wanted this to be our Kang. And I get the whole point is to introduce all these variants, but it felt like they were trying to give us that satisfying heroes ending while also them being like, but he's still out there in other variants and forms. But it's like, then what did I watch this film for? Merely like,
Right.
why did I watch this film? Because at the end of the day, Ant-Man and the Wasp are still together. They didn't grow. Ant-Man and Cassie are still together. They didn't really, I mean, Cassie learned how to fight, I guess. MODOK is dead now. This Kang's dead, so we're gonna get another Kang, but that's gonna be another Kang we have to reintroduce. Janet, nothing really happens to Janet. Janet gets home fine. I mean, I guess she gets closure. I mean, I think it would have made a bigger statement. I don't want to see anyone die, but like if you had killed off Hank or Janet just to give some stakes, I just feel like at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the film, what am I gonna take away? That was my biggest problem with the film. But I'd like to get your thoughts on
Sure.
this.
Well, Dill, I went into this movie fully anticipating on Ant-Man losing
Right.
because I was like, well, he like Kang Dynasty is like the next Avengers film. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I
And I
was
think
like,
that's also a problem too.
yeah. I was
Because
like,
if you
Kang has to come out on top in this film.
And that's a problem too, is when you tell us the next Avengers movie is going to be about Kang, when he dies at the end, you know that there's like, as soon as it ended, I looked at Lane and I went, wait, he can't be dead. They're making an Avengers movie where Kang's the villain, which meant,
Right.
oh, they have to either introduce another Kang, which we know is going to happen, or he's truly not dead. It's like when you show us so far in advance what's going to happen,
Mm.
it makes this death mean nothing. But keep
Yeah,
going. Sorry.
they should have introduced us to a different version of Kang and not
Mhm.
like the big bad. I'm the exiled one because I was going from multiverse to multiverse and killing people.
You want to know
Kang.
what would have been epic? If after the post-credit scene, that's when they said, coming next year, Avengers, the Kang Dynasty. Because then we would have been like, oh shit. But now, because we know it's going to be the Kang Dynasty, his death means nothing. And that's where
Mm,
I think the whole interconnectivity of the franchise is its biggest weakness at the end of the day, is the fact that
right.
we are thinking so far and ahead of what's going to happen later that it ruins what's happening in the moment. But
I
continue, sorry.
almost like I almost like I'm thinking like tonally. I wonder if the version that we of Kang that we met in Loki would have worked and fit better in this movie. like, you know, like the very whimsical, like
Mhm.
I'm jumping on the desk and I'm saying things like version of Kang. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
definitely wouldn't have been as scary. But
Yeah, and then you have the evil or Kang come in at the end and be like, "I'm gonna finish this," and then show him like doing his
just like
blue lasers.
annihilating
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
30
because
people in one laser zap.
yeah, I know the whole thing is like we want everyone to feel the way Scott did, in the fact that he won, but he can't stop thinking about Kang, and he's like, "What's gonna happen next?" But then they immediately undercut that with a joke where he's like, it's okay," and then he keeps walking. It's like, like I don't know. I
Right.
wish. I just think Ant-Man was not the right way to introduce such a scary presence. You know what I mean? Um, but Michael Douglas had some great moments. Like I said, I loved his Ant Army thing. Like I think that was
Yeah.
fun, where he kind of had the badass thing with the hearing
Okay.
aid. It reminded me of Carl Fredricksen from Up, where he's like kicking ass with this hearing aid. Like he still got it, even though he's an old man. Like this was the coolest Hank Pym I've seen. I loved this Hank Pym.
Yeah, Dale, I felt like sometimes this movie thought we were a little dumb. And like I
Yeah.
get it, like a lot of time has passed between Ant-Man, the first one where we met Darren, and now this one where he comes back as MODOK. But it was just like these little moments of like montage where they like montaged us back to like Darren's moments in Ant-Man. That I was like, no, you could have just shown me his face and all of them said, Darren, what the hell happened to you? And I would have gotten it. You know what I mean? And then this was another moment with the ant army. I just remembered this.
Mhm.
I saw, you know, Hank throughout the film, like his earpiece was like going off and he was like, you know, hearing the ants. And I was like, the ants are in the quantum realm. I just know it. They're there with them. They're gonna be there, like
Mm.
whatever. I felt that and I knew that as, you know, as an audience member. But then like when we get introduced to the ant army, the movie once again flashbacks to like literally an hour earlier when Hank Pym was like, "Oh, I can hear the ants." I was like, no, I picked that up earlier. Like, you don't need to show me, you don't need to remind me again. Like,
Mm.
this is, I don't know. I just felt like I was like, are you calling me dumb,
No,
movie?
I agree.
I'm
Yeah,
smarter than this, I
that's a good point.
think.
Um,
But that was very fun.
yeah.
And I liked how they kind of like took on their own personality of like just being really smart and being able to like build things and like you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, and another thing, like I said, Janet's storyline was so strong. Hope's was not, and Cassie's. I think we also have to talk about the casting, which we didn't talk about, but that has been a point of controversy because obviously they recast the girl who played Cassie. The girl who played her in Endgame, they basically recast her with Catherine Newton. Catherine Newton, a bit of a bigger star. She was in Detective Pikachu, Big Little Eyes, Freaky. She was in what's the movie? Blockers, which is really really good. I love
Right.
Blockers. But like, did we need a new Cassie? Because in this movie, I'll be honest, the weak link for me, and I love her as an actress, was Catherine Newton. And I think it's because
Really?
also I think there's a problem with just the way it was filmed and all the green screen. There were times where she almost looked like she wasn't looking at the person she was talking to. Like when she would be like, "Dad, Dad," she had that like line delivery, and it looked like she was almost acting against nothing.
Sure.
I don't know.
And
I
she
just didn't.
probably was acting against
Right,
nothing,
and
but
it
she
just
wasn't good at hiding the fact that she was acting
yeah.
against
I
nothing.
like her as a presence, but I don't think they did anything unique to where like we're now getting to the point where all the young people in the MCU are like these really smart scientists, you know, like
Mhm.
Shuri and Peter Parker, Riri Williams, and it's like,
Yeah.
what makes Cassie any different than them? Like they all have something else to them, whereas Cassie, it feels like she was there, she was there, but like I didn't feel like any sort of individuality for her
I
character.
mean, like I said before, Dill, I think that she has really just taken on this like advocate role in the MCU where like even if she doesn't have like all the brains or like fancy gadgets or whatever, even though she like low key kind of does, she has this like heart in her that like, you know, wants like she's willing to like go out and like help people regardless. Like I even wrote down like one of the first things was like loved Cassie being a little like rebel slash advocate, you know, like going to protests and shrinking the cop car and like
Yeah,
doing all that fun stuff. I I I mean, I didn't walk away from this movie like thinking negatively about her performance. I mean, did I think
no,
that she like blew me away at all? Like, no. Like, I thought that she was, you know, just fine at being Cassie Lang. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and JD brings up a good point that they're really building up this Young Avengers thing with, having Kate Bishop for Hawkeye, having Yelena as the new Black Widow, like all these younger people kind of coming in. Wanda's two kids, who I'm assuming will come back at some point. Like,
if they get recast, I'm gonna be so butthurt because I love Julian Hillard, who plays Billy.
Yeah.
The one who does magic. Tommy is the fast one, and his name is Jet Klein, I believe.
Wow. So those are two questions you'll never get in trivia now, Kelsey. Yeah, like I like the idea of setting up Young Avengers, but again, that's the thing. It seems like they're setting up so much stuff to where, what is this movie on its own? And I think on its own, it's like a fun adventure in the quantum realm, and then this big bad. But again, when you kill off the big bad, and then at the end, it's like, oh no, the other big bads are going to come in for this other big bad. It's just like, I just don't know what the main takeaway from this movie specifically was, aside from stuff that's going to be developed later on. That's my biggest qualm. And I see why people are leaving it frustrated, why it wasn't its own unique movie. I still think it was an enjoyable ride, and I don't know if I lean positively on it, but I'm definitely in the middle. I'm like at a 5-6 range out of 10, just because it was like, I did enjoy it, but it's like, as a movie, it's got some serious issues. I think I really do. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else worth bringing up. I mean, David Dastmalchian, great to have him back. I knew Luis and Kurt were going to be on it, but he played Vep. Yeah, the little Vep, right?
It's either VEB, Veb.
Veb, gotcha.
You know who I missed? Who only got a little tiny little shot? Jimmy Woo.
Yeah. Jimmy Woo was in one shot of this thing. Like, didn't even talk.
Also, someone who I deeply miss, which is why I think tonally this movie was off. Luis. Yeah. His friend. Well, where was the montage of him telling a story? Those are pivotal Ant-Man moments.
Well, and that's the thing, is I think this movie, it's not an Ant-Man film, in the fact that it wants to be a like kind of this preview to the Avengers film, but they're using the Ant-Man movie as a way to do it. Like kind of like how I'm trying to think of like another example in the MCU that did something similar, like kind of like Doctor Strange. Like they used him to do this big Wanda story when really it's Wanda's movie, not his.
Right.
But yeah, like no Jimmy Woo. I mean, he was there, but very little.
He literally was just in that one shot. Where he did
one
the
shot where he did the magic. Yeah. But David Dastmalchian's so great, and I love how they still used him again. Funny how his character in Suicide Squad is Polka Dot Man, and in this movie he's all about holes. Just something interesting.
I have holes.
Yeah, and I know some people didn't love that joke, because I think some of the joke is a little childish. It feels like Ant-Man humor, which is the thing. It feels like Ant-Man humor. It's just done. It's presented in a film that is taking itself way more seriously than a regular Ant-Man.
Oh, Dill, I have to
JD
ask.
makes a good point. Age of Ultron. This is similar, where you're using. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have to ask you about the dick moment between MODOK and Cassie, where she's like, just don't be a dick. And he's like, but look at me. It's too late. I'm a huge dick. Because Landon turned to me, our friend Landon, he was sitting in between us, and he turned to me and was like, Dill's gonna hate that. I can just feel it. Like Dill hated that.
I didn't hate it. It was just like, I think MODOK in general was such a disappointment for me. I don't know. I just, everything that came out of his mouth, I was like Emil Blonsky, they turned into a joke in She-Hulk, but it's because that was the tone of that show. It was kind of like this sitcom nonchalant thing.
Jake apparently loved that moment.
Yeah, Tato loved that one. Biggest laugh of the day, or the flick. And Carly loved the holes joke. So there we go.
But another moment that you actually found funny was the Baskin Robbins guy.
I did.
In the
let me really quickly talk about the MODOK stuff.
Sure. Sorry.
No, you're good. It's just, it's kind of the Emil Blonsky thing. If Emil Blonsky was turned into a joke in Avengers Infinity War, like what I mean? Like it just feels like you could have made MODOK silly and funny in a different context, but when he's supposed to be like this huge, scary presence, and when he's fighting, it is, which is why it's so tonally mismatched with the cracking the humor, and because Darren Cross was just kind of a pathetic character, and I get that's the whole point, but like,
right,
I don't want to see him again. I don't care enough. Like they didn't make him convincing enough or captivating enough presence earlier. His best performance, I still stand by it, is in the Sopranos movie where he plays Uncle Junior as a kid or as a young guy. Like he's really good in that. I think he's a good actor, but in this universe, I never really loved his character. But yeah, Baskin Robbins, I loved the Baskin Robbins Paul Rudd. It didn't make sense with
Yeah.
the scene because the whole thing is that they are multiplying. So why would Baskin Robbins Paul Rudd be there? That
Well, I
doesn't make
think it
sense.
was they said that it was like all possibilities. So I
True,
guess
true,
like
true, true.
that was a possibility where he like
Yeah.
never became Ant-Man
But
and
then why is it
just
one? One is different than all the rest. Like
so
then
in
then they
my
should have put
head,
other
Jill,
Ant-Mans. I don't know.
I'm a
But I
crazy
still love it because
person.
it was a funny moment. I
Right.
laughed out loud.
I'm like crazy because in that moment I went, wow, that is the one in like 14,600,000 fucking whatever the number Doctor Strange says.
Ooh, that's a trivia
Chance.
you don't know.
I will learn it by the end of this stream. Don't you worry. By the end of this 24-hour subathon, you can ask me the number. I'll know it.
What is the
Um,
two brothers thing? I don't. JD, explain that in a sec. Didn't hear.
Kelsey, that
No,
scene
we'll
of
get to that in a
MODOK.
sec.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Kelsey, keep going. I'm gonna have JD explain what he meant there in two brothers.
Was alligator Ant-Man? Oh, like alligator Loki.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like Loki really fully explored the idea of all these different Lokis, whereas Ant-Man it was trying to do the same
Right.
thing. But that's not taken away. Like this scene was probably my favorite like action piece. Like I
No,
loved
yeah.
the multiplying Ant-Man. It was very Ralph Breaks the Internet of them mounting on one another and little Baskin Robbins Scott Lang, like, and then when he's at the top of the mountain and like Scott offers him that hand, the Baskin Robbins Scott, like I thought that was fun, and I'm a big pro Baskin Robbins guy. I know Kelsey's not, so that might have also hurt.
Okay, Dill, I have a few questions that I want to touch upon.
Yeah.
So I thought that there was a major plot hole in this movie
Okay.
that people may have been pointing out since
Mm.
Endgame. But when Scott Lang is in the quantum realm for 5 years, he says that for him, it felt like 5 hours. And then Janet Van Dyne is in the quantum realm for 30 years. So you think that, like, oh, I'm just going to do some simple math right now and say that to her, then shouldn't it have felt like 30 hours in the quantum realm? So a little bit more than a day. And then we're
Mm.
watching her time in the quantum realm where she has all these friends. They go to the bar together. They all know who she is. She's the Janet Van Dyne. And then she like works with Kang on his ship to help him escape. I'm like, you
Wow.
did
Yeah.
all of this in a little bit more than a day. But I think that this is just like a huge plot hole that they didn't really think
No,
about.
that's a good point. That because
Do you know what I
time
mean?
passes different. I'm wondering if there are different areas of the quantum realm where like
Oh,
time
where
moves
it like
faster. Because like maybe Scott was in some sort of limbo and wasn't fully in the quantum realm. He was like in because he was kind of like floating around, whereas Janet was like there. I don't know though. Yeah, like Jake says, there might be different chunks.
okay.
Watch
I
out for
figured that
time
there'd
warps
be
and stuff like
some
that.
like
But again, they didn't
answer.
fully explain it. Like if they're gonna go so big in concept, like explain it. Like you can do a longer than 2 hour movie. I mean, this was only 2 hours. There have been
Right.
3 hour movies. Like why not have it
Eternals is 2.5.
right? Like take the time to explain it. And that's why I like Eternals so much, is it doesn't over explain, but it explains just enough to where we care about the situations and all that stuff. Yeah, they mention time storms or whatever, but like again, it's like kind of nonchalant.
Right.
But JD is explaining the two brothers. When MODOK dies, he calls Scott a brother. Rick and Morty joke. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, I would have loved to see like a MODOK Ant-Man team up, and maybe there will be variants of MODOK, and I think that's also a trap the MCU has put itself in, is like you can bring back any character really, because there's so many different multiverses and dimensions to where no deaths really stick. I mean, we thought how possibly did Cross die? Darren Chris, not Blaine from Glee.
Darren Chris. No, we don't want
Cross,
Darren Chris to die.
How did Darren Cross die in the first? How did he survive in the first one? Like, how did he possibly survive that? Because he got
Well,
shrunken,
he was like all,
Well, I know, but that's the whole thing, is like they can really bring back any character, which kind of gives a sense of like nonchalantness for the MCU, where it's like, does any death really matter? And I know Guardians 3, they're advertising it as like this final farewell, and we know a lot of the actors won't come back, but we know even if we lose Drax or Rocket, there's still other ones in the multiverse where it's like, that's the one thing that I think the MCU has set themselves into a trap for, where I'm like, nothing will ever feel permanent like it did way back when in phase 1 or 2 when we would lose these big figures. Even Bucky, when we lose him in First Avenger, he comes back in the very next phase in Winter Soldier. It's like,
Yeah.
and I know some stuff in the comics you can point that out, like, oh, that was in the comics, but still, it's like I feel like the more permanent, the better. Even
So,
Logan, which is not MCU, they're bringing him back in Deadpool 3. It's like nothing can
oh,
ever
right,
rest.
right, right.
Nothing can ever rest. And that's just, I think, the problem with franchising in general is they're finding too many ways to bring back people. Whereas Avatar The Way of Water did a similar thing and bring back actors, but brought them back as new characters in very creative ways. Whereas I feel like the creativity here is just, oh, we opened up another portal and this person existed in that portal, so he's back. Or this person, we built him robotic legs, he's back. And it's like, I want a little bit more creativity. I don't know.
Yeah. And so, Dill, going off of all this, do you really think that this version of Kang that we watched die in this movie is actually gone?
I can't feel that way because the MCU has told me nothing's ever dead. So no, I don't think he's gone. And even if he is, there's other variants, and that's the thing. Like I don't feel like that ending sticks as well because of that too. That's a good point. Carly brings up too is Janet's secrecy. She's very secret. She kept the quantum realm a secret, but if it's such a
Right.
threat that opening up the quantum realm and having Kang possibly escape it is going to lead to human destruction, then
Yeah.
Janet probably would have said something to her family, and
Yeah.
that's the whole
But
thing.
I
It's like why didn't she tell anyone? Like Cassie opens up, or at least tell Hank, to where Hank can then tell
like,
Cassie, you should
hey,
not
don't
open
go
up this
fucking
portal.
around and making satellites to access the
Yeah,
quantum
all
realm.
she has to
Just
say is,
if
I don't want to
you're
talk. I
thinking
don't
about
want
it.
to talk about it, but please do not engage with the quantum realm again. That's all she had to say
Right.
to her granddaughter. Um, another
Hey,
thing,
that's
she's
fair.
not
But then there's no
really
movie.
another plot hole I picked up on. She's not really her granddaughter, right? She's
Uh,
they're Hope's parents, and you know what I found weird is that the Cassie calls Hope, but calls Hank and Janet grandma and grandpa. Did you notice that? That was a little weird to me. I'm like, it's fine. No, it's not weird to call them grandparents because like now Hope and Scott are together, but it's like you're gonna call them grandpa and grandma, but then you're not gonna call Hope mom. I just thought that was
huh.
weird, right?
That's interesting, Dill. I didn't
Because
pick
it's
up
not
on
like she
that
spent
until
any
right
extra
now.
time with them. If anything, she didn't have any time with the three of them. They were all blipped.
Speaking of Hope, I just wanted to get this one last
Yeah,
thought about her. Obviously, we're very disappointed in like what happened. I don't think I'm willing to bet that they
true.
had
She
a
does have a mom, true, but also, I mean, she still calls Hope's parents the grandparents. So it was just a weird choice. Like, why
right
wouldn't
because
she just call them Hank and Janet? Yeah.
they're not married.
Hmm.
Maybe she doesn't like Hope. Maybe like Cassie's like
Maybe they should have had a plot line where they explored that. That would have been a great way to get Wasp involved in this movie.
right. So speaking of that, I'm willing to bet that there was maybe a different version of this movie where Hope did more, and then Evangeline Lilly just is Evangeline Lilly, so they had to rewrite a
Maybe.
bunch of shit.
Maybe.
Um,
But then don't call it, then they should just call it Ant-Man Quantumania.
no,
Like
100%.
yeah.
Well, anyway, but that's neither here nor there. What I think the movie should have been was should okay, it should have okay, so they all get sucked into the quantum realm, right? And so like Janet and Hank are like the first to go, and that's Hope. That's when Hope is like, oh, gotta go. Like I think like Hank, Janet go, and then like Cassie go, and then like Scott and Hope exchange a look that's like, well, fuck, we gotta go now too, because like everyone we love just like
Mm.
went in. Like it
Mhm.
so then they could have went in together. They could have both crash landed wherever Cassie was, and then it could have been the three of them, and then just Janet and Hank together. And I
Yeah.
think that the two, like, I think that if she was just more involved in that storyline, and then we could have explored a storyline where Cassie doesn't really like Hope, and then through this journey in the quantum
Yeah.
realm, they rekindle their relationship, and they,
And then they have
have
an
a
arc. Yeah.
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 So that's what this movie should have been. That's all I
Yeah.
wanted to say.
That's a good idea.
Dill,
We do have to wrap this up, but
did you
yeah.
give this movie a rating out of
I was about
10?
to say, yeah, so I'm going to get rid of the spoilers here and just give our last blanket thoughts. I think Kang is awesome, but I think it's too much setting up the future, not enough focusing on the now. And I think the arcs for the characters that we already had were kind of weak, especially Wasp. But I gave this a solid 5 out of 10 because I still don't think it's bad. But I don't think it's great. I think it's like right in the middle, entertaining, but not amazing. So I'm leaning 5 right now. but we'll see. And yeah, Carly says a good point. What if they had stayed in the quantum realm? What if someone gets
Yeah,
trapped
that's
in
what
there?
I thought was going to happen.
But then we might retread into Ant-Man and the Wasp, where they were trying to get Janet, and it would have just been kind of recycling the same plot points over and over. But again, they keep
Right.
bringing people
That's
back from the
another-
dead.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm at a 5 out of 10. What do you say, Kels?
I'm embarrassed to say now.
You went lower or higher?
No. I gave this movie a 6 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, that's right on par. Cool. So we're like right in the middle on it, but I definitely don't think it's the worst MCU movie, and it's definitely not worthy of being one of the only 2 rotten ones with Eternals. I think there are far worse movies than both of those.
Yeah, I can't really listen to anything the critics say because they always dislike the movies I love. So
that's true.
Fuck them.
So that was Marvel-ous Movie Mondays, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to kind of do this outro, and then I'm going to transition to the next thing. Kelsey, stay on for just a sec. But here is our outro. Thanks, guys, for watching.